if you are a founder of a 1 to 20 million pound company and you've ever had the appetite to eventually exit or sell your business, this episode is for you. What I really liked about this conversation was that I got to be a student as much as I got to be a participant. I regularly, when working with clients, hear people say they want to be exiting in 3 to 5 years, but in order to actually make that happen, in order to get the best multiple, what is it that needs to be done? And that's where I went really deep in this conversation, unpacking, well, what does an ideal sales mix actually look like in terms of project versus recurring? What does it actually mean in terms of the founder's role? And if it is the case that by the time it comes to exit, the founder is still deeply entrenched, what does that do to the multiplier or the deal terms? When looking at the pipeline, what is it that's ideal and what is it that increases the multiplier again? We went through a series of different sliding scales in do this and you get more money for the same business, do this and you get less money for the same business. It was really, really fascinating. Like the work is already being done in these organizations. The sales team is already selling. You might as well do it in a way which is going to maximize your potential future return even if you're not looking to eventually sell your business. I think Mark made a very good case in this conversation as to why it's still good to build a business as if it were for sale, even if it's not. I think you're going to get tons and tons and tons of value from this conversation. Enjoy. Mark, welcome to Sales Traction.
Very glad to be here indeed, Ollie. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, more than welcome. Lots of ground for us to cover. In the preamble prior to us starting, I was saying how one of the things that I'm most excited about in this conversation is that there's so much that I just genuinely don't know when it comes to exiting and when it comes to what is the role of sales in exiting. I get there's value in having a system. I get there's value in structure, but in terms of the actual mechanicals of what it is that a buyer is looking for and what it is that tends to kill the most deals, where there tends to be the most tension, a lot of that I genuinely don't know. So as far as this conversation goes, I'm going to be very much coming at it from a student standpoint, where I'm also effectively one of the listeners looking to learn more. The first thing that I want to ask, and this is something that I see all the time, just about every founder that I speak to is looking to exit in 5 years. Yeah, there's always a 3 to 5 year horizon. 5 years time, I think we'll probably look at selling up. Like that's always kind of floating around. And pretty much always 5 or so years later, it's still a 5 year horizon. Why?
Well, I think it's because of a couple of things. The first part is that 3 to 5 years, that's what I hear too all the time, Oliver. It's a far enough window for them to think that they're thinking about it, but also it shows that it's on their agenda. And I think the reason is quite simply life gets in the way, or business gets in the way. Selling a business is a discipline. You have to focus on doing it. It's a challenging process. It's a demanding process. There's a million moving parts. And it's also quite emotionally intimidating, particularly for founder and owner managed businesses. You might be talking about a business they started in their garage or the kitchen that they built to something of scale. And the idea of selling it plays with their sense of identity because they are business owners. And that is who they define themselves as. The idea of selling it means a change in that identity. So it's an emotional decision as much as a financial one. And also there's a perfectionist attitude, I think, to some entrepreneurs. They want to just one more thing, just one more customer to onboard, just one more product stream, just one more this, that, and the other. And so I think, and they enjoy it, right? Most entrepreneurs I speak to absolutely love running their business. And it's become part, as I say, part of their identity, but also they're really enjoying the challenge of growth. The idea of selling, it takes a rare business owner, I think, to actively plan for sale. They do exist, but there are very relatively few who start a business on day one with the express intention of selling it. I mean, they probably should do that. That's probably good advice when you're starting a business. How am I getting out of this? The first question that you ask yourself. But also, I think that 3 to 5 year window is it's long enough away not to be a rock in kind of EOS terminology, but it means that it's on their mind. One entrepreneur once told me, even thinking about selling a business felt to me like scaling a vertical cliff, because once you let that rabbit out the hat, once you start articulating the fact you're going to sell, then you need to do something about it. And that requires a bit of discipline in itself. So a mixture of the perfectionism or joy of running the business, plus the emotional impact of what would it actually mean if they did, particularly for those who have, as I say, founded the business from nothing.
Huh, that's so fascinating. Yeah, when I think of organizations, or let's say those that have gone down the venture capital route or the private equity route, with those, it's obviously very, very explicit. In order for somebody else to be injecting money into the business, there has to be some kind of payoff further down the line. So very, very clear, very, very clear. But for those that aren't, it almost becomes, yeah, it's like if I won the lottery, what would I do? Yeah, if I sold the business, then what would I do? And what you said there of the perfectionism, that's actually something that I do also hear, in as much as it's like, well, why would it take the chips off the table now? Because if we were to just have that breakthrough, then in terms of what that would then do for our ability to sell and the number that we could be able to sell for, it would be so much more. So I suppose then that the question goes from why is it the case that everyone always wants to and doesn't, to why is it the case that people do end up selling, even though that is the case that there's always another horizon, always another mountain to conquer, if you like? What tends to be the most common reason for people going, all right, enough's enough?
Well, it's often often strategic in terms of a milestone in people's lives. Some people say, I want to get out by the time I'm 40, 45,
Yeah.
50, 60. So it becomes like a personal ambition. It's often in response to the market. So as we stand currently, there are lots of buyers out there, including private equity, who are really interested in fast-growing businesses. And there are lots of brokers and advisors representing buyers who are really active in approaching companies. So people often get their head turned. They have an approach. They have what we call in the trade a tap on the shoulder, maybe formal down the golf club or over dinner, maybe an email, maybe an approach like that, and it gets them thinking. So some kind of external event. It could be, to sound a bit pretentious, it could be something more macroeconomic. I mean, look at the world that we're in as we speak. I mean, there are influencing factors outside of a business owner's control. It could be regulatory. It could be just that they want to go and do something else. And I often find this with entrepreneurs. They've built a great business. Let's take somebody in software and tech. They love programming. They are proudly calling themselves. They say to me, "I'm a proud geek. I love coding. I love programming." This is what they hate: the red tape of the business. They dislike the HR issues. They dislike the bureaucracy, and they want to go off into a dark room and write a new program. And that kind of scenario breaks over in different sectors as well. So they're kind of born entrepreneurs, and they've had another idea. There's a new shiny thing to pursue. And that is a characteristic too, and a brilliant one of entrepreneurs. It's why they're so good at what they do. But I think it's often something around that kind of inbound approach, personal life event. I mean, it could be bereavement, it could be divorce, it could be something like that. Or what the market is doing. And if they see Dave down the road has sold his business and they think, Dave sold, I wonder who's interested in me. That is the kind of domino effect that happens. And in case your listeners are unaware, it's often an enormo deal right at the top of the chain in a sector that starts a cascade of consolidation down. So
is that right?
So when big businesses merge, combine, or go on an acquisition or consolidation trail, they will buy another business who looks to buy another, and that's a consolidation curve, and they happen in sectors periodically. So a good piece of advice would be keep an eye on your market. Are your competitors selling? Direct competitors or similar businesses. Are you seeing activity in the sector? Because that may move your 3 to 5 year window dramatically, because the time to go could be now. I mean, it's an old story, but there's a hilarious anecdote about Netflix looking to buy a blockbuster video being offered Netflix in something like 1998. And they were, no, I think we're going to wait and see on the internet. So the time the time for Netflix was the future, but the time for Blockbuster was the past. Ride that wave, ride that market.
Okay, so let's snap that into reality then. Let's say I'm a founder and I've heard that and I've said, yeah, do you know what, Mark? Fair. Let me look at putting us out on the market. Not necessarily that we're going to sell, but I'm just curious to see where we are. When that happens, I would imagine that there's probably a disparity between the owner's perception of what they're worth and how they're set up versus the market's perception of what they're worth. Would that be fair, do you think?
That would be absolutely fair, but it actually cuts both ways.
Okay.
Sometimes owner managers, founders think their business is worth much less than it actually is. And
Really?
sometimes they think it's worth much more. And I've had conversations with founders through the years who say to me, Google's going to buy me, Meta's going to buy me. The reality is they wouldn't be on their radar. But equally, you have quite modest founders who think, oh, who's going to be interested in my little business? But even though they're doing something brilliant. What you're talking about there, Ollie, is the skills gap, the experience gap. The best buyers and investors will likely have made multiple acquisitions. They will likely have multiple feelers out to multiple different targets, as they call them. And when I say target, what I mean is a great business, privately owned, typically business that has been identified by a larger buyer or investor. And they know exactly what they're doing. They've got shiny suited, expensive lawyers who are brilliant at their job. And they know how much they want to pay, why they want to pay it. And they look at a founder's business in a very different way than the founder would. They'd look at it with a buyer's perspective, with their kind of microscope glasses on. And what they're looking for is opportunity, but they're also looking for risk. And
Okay.
my experience is that many entrepreneurs do not know what the risk elements are in their business. It could be, maybe we talk about this later, it could be customer concentration, it could be contracts ending, it could be staff levels, it could be the entrepreneur, the founder themselves. So really, I think the best advice is, what can you identify the risk elements in your own business? Because those are value inhibitors. Those are going to decrease a buyer's interest, and you want to work on kind of eradicating those, especially if you've got that legendary 3 to 5 year window. You've got loads of time to do it.
Yeah.
So that.
So
And
given
on
that,
valuation, if there is just one buyer in the frame, what do you think is going to happen? They're going to come in with if let's just say reasonable valuation, might be a bit lowball, but it might be, not unfair. And an inexperienced buyer would maybe bite at that, not knowing who else is out there and who else might pay more. So the other piece of advice, I suppose, is if you do get an approach, don't just talk to that one buyer. Press the pause button straight away. Take a deep breath. And I would say this, of course, but get some advice, because you've got nothing to compare that offer to. Some industries are super sophisticated. Insurance, for example. A business in insurance, that's a very sophisticated market, and they will know how much they're worth, because they have industry publications that kind of list the maths, list the metrics on how you value. But that is a rarity, and most other sectors, most other businesses, the valuation, I would say, put your finger in the air, because really your business is worth what someone is prepared to pay for it. And I know that's a cliche, but that is the end of the day. That is a fact.
yeah, it's fascinating. I remember hearing about Instagram and their acquisition from Facebook at the time, obviously now Meta. And when they paid $1 billion for them, I think they were still pre-revenue. But I remember at the time, Facebook weren't yet on mobile. So in terms of, well, what's the value you're willing to pay? Well, the platform that's got 1 million users and growing like crazy on the platform that we're looking to get to, mobile. What are you willing to pay for it? And I remember at the time, a lot of people were looking at it, it's crazy. But if it's valuable to them within the strategic sphere of what they're operating in, then who's to say what's valuable and what's not? Well, one of the areas that I do want to touch on, you mentioned risks. Now, within sales traction, the key thing that we're focused on here is the sales side. So if I was to be let's say the sales director or maybe the founder that's focusing on sales, and I'm looking at my business, I'm assessing how attractive it might be to a buyer through the lens of sales, what tend to be the biggest risks? What should I be looking out for?
Have you come across that phrase, the pipe is life? I think the risk is, can you accurately track and predict your sales pipeline? If you're looking down the barrel of onboarding no new customers or adding to your customer, then that would constitute risk. Conversely, sales pipeline is a major KPI in any business sale transaction. Buyers love to see growing businesses that are posting year-on-year top-line sales growth. So I've talked about, with risk comes evidence. So are you able to demonstrate not just your sales from the last quarter, 12 months, 36 months? Can you give a fair indication of what you expect going forward? So that kind of future-proofing, evidence-backed. In terms of personnel, I suppose the risk would be, and we have seen this in deals, the risk would be, are there key personnel who are major revenue earners, major fee earners? Does their continued involvement in the business, will that be necessary to a buyer? Likely, yes. I mean, if you've got the greatest sales team, it could very well be that your buyer is buying you to have access to them. They call it, there's another horrible word in our world, they call it an acqui-hire. You buy to hire, because we all know this, getting good people is tough, right? So in terms of that element of risk is new business, one, concentrated in the hand of a small number of people and therefore not transferable. So to recap, the risk elements are not being able to demonstrate not just good sales historically and at current point, but going forward. And that comes down to another thing that's really important in our world, really good management information. And I think the good news here is, we run on EOS, we love EOS, and we definitely recommend it to our clients. You have got a system there where you are tracking stuff. You have people, the right people on the bus who are accountable for those things. So it's really about eradicating the perception of risk and enforcing or demonstrating that you have a plan and that plan is working and that you can prove it.
And it's going to sound super dumb. Higher the risk, the lower the multiplier.
Absolutely right.
Just a sliding scale, effectively.
Absolutely.
So concentrate.
Yeah. Exactly. Think of the seesaw. The more you are able to reduce the perception of risk, I'm reducing it this side, the higher, for those listening, I'm raising my elbow now. The higher the multiple and the higher the confidence, really. We can talk about multiples, but really it's about confidence. A buyer and their lawyers are going to really get under pick through a client's business. They're going to demand a huge avalanche of very detailed information and challenge it and interrogate it. So if you want to make sure you have all that to hand, but also you want to make sure that that it backs up the story you're telling. The number of people I've been in this, I've been working for Initium for 15 years this year, and the number of people who said, I know this year's numbers aren't great, but next year it's going to be high time. It's going to be.
So you can model it on next year.
and actually, you can model it on next year. You can say you're not buying the business as it stands on this date today. You're buying what it means to you. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and those kind of the uplift, the upside that a buyer can get. But if you can demonstrate that this is happening and demonstrate the market, then next year becomes much more important. The next 3 years become more important than the last 3 years. That would certainly be our argument. Sell the future, right?
Yeah, of course. Now, when looking at risk, again, you've mentioned dependence on a couple of key salespeople, and I certainly understand that. I think another one which would be quite topical for a lot of people that are listening to this would be also dependence on founders.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as a lot of businesses, especially in B2B, start out, like the fact that the founder is selling almost is a USP, or they're able to break through doors, they're able to close deals better, faster, and that becomes a bit of a superpower. But then it gets to a certain point where I feel like that superpower becomes a crutch and a dependency. I mean, if I was looking to buy a company, I wouldn't want it dependent on the founder. Like, at what point does it transition from one to the other? Is it binary? If it is dependent on that person equals deal killed? Or is there, educate me when it comes to that? You must see it all the time.
Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't necessarily be deal kill, but it would materially affect the terms of the transaction. So let's take an example. Say a founder in a business is CEO, but he's also, or she is also the best salesperson, has customer-facing relationships. When their best customers pick up the phone, they pick up the phone to the founder. They're the voice and the face of the business. And they win a lot of business. If they were to come to a sale process, what's the first thing the buyer is going to say? I need you. You're staying, right?
Yeah.
So it's technically possible still to sell that business, but obviously any buyer worth their salt are not going to let that founding CEO, who also is the best salesman and makes the tea, they're not going to let them walk away. They're going to want to lock them in. And that's where you come across a scenario such as an earnout, which is, I'm sure, something you might have heard of, where a certain amount of the sale value is paid on day one, but the rest of it is contingent on targets over a few years. So our goal with all of our clients is to get them the most cash on day one as possible, and limit any deal against the future performance.
Interesting.
If that's a sale to a trade buyer. Private equity is a bit different because they might be wanting to stay to grow with the private equity as well. But so our goal, as much dosh on day one as possible, and as little based on future performance as we can possibly manage. That's the goal. But to look at it from the buyer's point of view, and I'm going to say that a lot today, what is any good buyer going to do? They're going to see the value of that founder to the business, and they're going to want to lock them in. Particularly if that founder is the brand. You know, there's a lot of goodwill in transactions. It's not all about the balance sheet and the profit and loss account. Sometimes, and in your Instagram example is a really good point. Yes, you're buying a platform, but you're also buying the brand, the strategic possibility that owning that brand creates. You see this a lot in portfolio businesses. You know, think about great businesses in food or in tech or in retail that have built a brand, and that is the value of the business, where you can take the brand. So, and if the owner is the brand, then obviously any buyer is going to want to say, do you know what, you are super important. And some clients are quite happy with that. They love the sales, or in my example earlier, they love the coding, they love doing a certain thing, and they hate running the business, and they need some support to do that. But I'm waffling now. But to answer your question neatly, yes, the more dependence that there is on any key person, but yes, particularly the founder, the more likelihood there is that a buyer or investor is going to want to handcuff them to that business, at least in the medium term.
Yeah, interesting. It almost feels like another sliding scale or seesaw, if you like. The greater the level of dependence, the longer the handcuffs need to be on for, where they're effectively building the systematization of, well, what does it look like without this individual there? And that's going to take longer the more entrenched and the more dependent the organization is. And so I suppose then the Disneyfied view of what's going to happen in 3 to 5 years, which is, I think most people think of as, well, I sell and I get a big check and I run off into the sunset. It's like, well, that's not quite the case. You know, not if it's heavily dependent on you. You may get big check or part of big check and then stagger it out. So I suppose then, if that's in the case, we then need to reverse engineer it. And if we are looking 3 to 5 years out, take the average 1 to 20 million pound company, what would then be your recommendation? Because I imagine it's not wait until the third year, then think about it. Like it's probably you can start thinking about it now, and if
Yeah.
you want to be maximizing for saleability and multiple.
Yeah.
So, what would be something that even if I'm looking 3 years out, 5 years out, what can I start doing now? What would that journey be?
Well, I mean, it's difficult, right? Because it's particularly if it's your own business and you feel, and business owners often say to me, it's my baby, and they want the control and they want, there's almost an element of control freakishness about it. I want to make sure I'm all over the business, but it's about hitting the pause button and stepping back. You could start to transition yourself out of multiple seats. If you are the CEO and the owner, focus on the top level strategy for the business, the direction. But you shouldn't be getting in your car and driving 600 miles to win a new client. Because that's a waste of your time.
Yeah.
Right. So you've got to start looking to hire and recruit. I would recommend, and we see this quite a lot, particularly in, say, the HR space. And I think you've had some of our partners on your podcast previously. Look at fractional. What kind of fractional support could come in and start helping you plan the people scenario with your business or the marketing scenario with your business? I think a founder or founders have got to start strategically thinking about stepping back. And I know it's easier said than done. You don't just go out and hire an identikit clone of you 20 years younger or whatever to do the job. Yeah. It just doesn't happen. And I have also heard lots of very well-meaning entrepreneurs have tried to do this, but the wrong hire, particularly for a small SME, can be catastrophic.
Yeah, they do.
And I've, in fact, I had a conversation the other week with a guy, lovely business, but he's basically lost a year because he employed at quite a lot of money a sales director who was, quite frankly, rubbish. So he's had to do it himself. And that is, if you're in a business of 15, 20 people, that is a huge impact. If you've got 1,500, less so. But if you're a growing SME, every strategic move that you make, we all make mistakes in business, right? You want it to pay off. So I would recommend actively, and this is a phrase you will have come across, work on the business, don't work in the business. And be honest with yourself. If the founder is the best salesperson, that's great. Start mentoring, start bringing someone through, start developing and looking at the potential within your team. But you really shouldn't be wearing more than one hat. You are an employee. It's your own business, but you are an employee. Try to start making yourself a bit redundant. Try to start reducing your role. I'll let you into a little trick that we do sometimes use. So often the founder is important to the business, but when we meet buyers, and we would always look to meet more than one buyer, we might bring in the second tier management to conduct those meetings, not the shareholder, because it physically presents a united front that this is the future of the business. You don't need to worry about the founder. He's not that important. So we would coach our clients to step back, to promote from within, not to handle all the conversations, because it can get emotional, right? So we often will coach our clients on what to say to buyers, so as to make them feel, so as not to break the perception to the buyer that they're super important. Bring the second tier through. And I know it's easier said than done. It's really, really hard to say, for a business owner to say, this is my business. I need to keep control. I need to know everything that's going on. And that's back to EOS, right? That is what that system is so fantastic for entrepreneurs. Clues in the name, right? That you're able to see the accountability across your business. So easier said than done.
If I was then, if I was then looking at it as, even though it's easier said than done, we're still looking at it from the vantage point of, I've got 3 years or 5 years of a journey to go on, if you like. So when's the best place to start? When's the best time to start? Like that journey is now. So if there's one part which is pipeline, okay, cool. We want to make sure that that's nice, healthy, and predictable. Another part is then seat extraction. We don't want it to be the case that one person is dependent or multiple seats dependent on one person. And the other thing that you mentioned a little bit earlier, just in passing, that I then want to come back to, which also impacts sales, is customer concentration.
Hmm.
So not having an over reliance, and I imagine this is another one of those sliding scales. Talk to me a little bit about that, because I imagine some people uh, could easily mistake all revenue being created equal. You just look at the top line, and the top line is the top line. But if you then click a level beneath that, you then got 50 or 60% rooted in one customer. Educate me as to why that is bad, and then what it is that's actually good. Like, well, what is the barometer of this is healthy, and this is what a buyer would look for?
Okay, it's a great question, and it is. You are absolutely right. The higher the concentration with one or indeed a handful of customers, the more risk. It's back to that risk point again. The more risk a buyer will see. Yeah, 50% would be worrying. I think we say them. You know, again, it's a finger in the air, but 25% with one client is probably about as much as you'd want to go,
Mhm.
as long as you have more than four clients, right? And the reason
Yeah.
it's a problem is because buyers will understandably see that as a massive risk element. And you hear this story a lot. Oh, we've worked with them for years. We haven't got any contract. It was a gentleman's handshake. They'll stay with us forever until they don't. And
Mm.
that is why having your revenue and therefore your profitability, of course, dependent on the decisions of a handful of customers is nearly always a bad thing. We have, hilariously though, I'm going to disprove my point. We have sold a business in the last few years where they had 80% concentration with one customer.
Wow.
But that was a very big customer and it was a public sector customer. So it's about the stickiness of your client base. So the ideal to shoot for, regardless of sector, is lots of customers that each make up a small proportion of your revenue. So if one falls over, you've got one ready to move in. In sectors like software, you might have thousands of customers with very low value deals, low value sales, i.e. license revenue.
Mhm.
Some businesses, you might have huge high capex sales where one sale makes a material difference to the turnover. So back to your sliding scale point, somewhere in the middle is pretty good. You want to be able to demonstrate that you've got a lot of customers that come back,
Mhm.
repeat revenues. Ideally, they would be contracted or recurring revenues. That's good because, again, buyers will take comfort if you've got customers under contract. A 3 to 5 year contract, ideally, to use that time frame again. But yes, so I suppose depends on the sector, because say a software company might have thousands of customers. That isn't going to be practical for a facilities management company, for
Sure.
example. But just try to spread the risk, spread the load. One of the interesting parts is when you have a marquee, a really big name customer, and I won't name any names for fear of reprisals, but let's just imagine very large brand businesses. They often really stiff smaller businesses on margins, right? So
Sure.
we have heard a lot. Well, we've got XYZ Limited as our major customer, and then you find the margin they're getting off that major customer is tiny, but that major customer keeps saying jump, and the business says how high because they're
Yeah.
desperate to keep hold of the brand. It could be once you drill down, as you said, Ollie, into the numbers, you've got a much better customer who's number 26 on your customer list of top 50, who you should be doing more work with. So it's really about understanding your customer base, not just responding and saying, yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, sir, to your biggest customer. So
Mm.
interrogate your customer base as well. Would be
Yeah, do you know, I think that's really, really insightful. I've certainly seen that happen many times, many, many, many times, in as much as landing the whale feels like this is going to be transformational for the business. And sure, it has the potential for it, but I've seen it almost sink a business multiple times, in fact, where it just drags everyone in. And then the core focus of the organization kind of gets lost because everyone's sucked into the vortex of a large organization. I've seen the similar things happen with not even when they're actually signed, but when working on the deals as well. Like if it seems like a whale can pull the entire sales team in and
mm,
everyone's focus, doesn't end up happening or gets kicked back by a year. Meanwhile, they've lost like 50 or 60% of the rest of the pipeline. And it's like everything just has to start again, especially in project-based businesses. That can be really, really dangerous. I've seen some pretty bad things happen in that world. So, okay, so then what have we covered off? So we've covered off then pipeline, covered off seat extraction, covered off customer mix. I think the other one then that I'm interested to explore a little bit, you've mentioned recurring a couple of times. And when I speak to a lot of business owners, need recurring, need recurring, need recurring, need recurring. Talk to me about the value of project versus recurring. Because surely projects, you've got the spikes of revenue as well, where there is a place for it. But I feel like it kind of gets tucked aside. Like I don't really care about that. I just want recurring, just want recurring.
Yeah.
So what is an ideal mix there, if there is an ideal mix? And again, thinking of this through the lens of I'm a founder, I'm not just saying to my team, sell more. I'm thinking I want to get this kind of revenue mix because that optimizes our saleability and multiplier, etc.
It does. And it's the basic equation is this: the more provable recurring revenue you have, hopefully under contract, for example, maintenance contracts or after sales, the more confidence a buyer is going to have and the higher your multiple is going to be. So those people who are saying, I need recurring revenue, they're absolutely right. That is the holy grail. But you are also right that not every business can get recurring revenue, right? There are sectors that this just wouldn't apply to.
Sure.
But having a marquee portfolio project that you're working on, a big whale, a big fish, can also be a real door opener. Are you on the framework for this major infrastructure contract? For example, if you're in construction, are you on the framework for tendering opportunities with a major? Are you an approved supplier to a really juicy and desirable business, and you do lots of work with that business? That has value too. Again, back down to what you can prove. Can you prove that you are? What's your win rate like? If you are asked to tender for a particular job, are you always beating out against the big boys in your sector? And if you can demonstrate that, all the better. But buyers don't typically like businesses that are completely dependent upon projects because it's lumpy revenue. And what happens if the deal gets pulled? I'll give you the example of HS2 a few years ago. So obviously, lots of money and investment going into HS2. It was the big thing. And then the Prime Minister at the time, Mr. Sunak, makes the decision that, we said we were going to do that. We're not going to do it anymore. There were lots of businesses who had significant investment across the supply chain in the success of that.
Wow.
Suddenly it's gone. Poof. So that's why the project, it feels risky because it could just stop. It could happen at any time. And it's back to my earlier point about the kind of macroeconomic environment. These are factors that you can't control. But other things that are good. So I suppose ideally a business would have a nice mix of some project-based work, but demonstrable recurring revenue. And I'll give you a really good example of a business model we all know: estate agents. Right? You can be an estate agent in West London selling £6 million houses, £12 million houses, but the value of your business is in your lettings income, i.e., how many houses you are letting on behalf of landlords. So that is the metric. That is how buyer they like to see the lettings income, and the one-off sales of mansions.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, they do factor in, but they're not as important to the buyer as the repeatable, reliable lettings income.
Wow. I think that's a really good example. Really, really, really good example. Because I suppose if I was thinking of it through that lens, I would almost think the project revenue is really just a flagship that enables me to get more lettings. Like everything sort of funnels back to that main point. And I suppose if that's then the case, arcing all the way back, if I'm then a founder and I'm looking at my business, and let's say I do have the appetite to sell over the course of the next 5 years, you're not just going to flick a switch and then, all right, cool, we're now all recurring. But over the course of a 3 to 5 year journey, that is a shift that can take place. You can chunk that down into, well, what is it that we want to achieve this year? What's the rock this quarter? What's the sprint that we're going to do to make the first steps towards moving in that direction? Something else, and I think I saw this on your website actually, which was, even if you're, or it might have been LinkedIn, even if you're not looking to sell, it's good to still have a business that would be attractive to buyers.
Yeah.
Why?
Because you're not running it emotionally and you're treating it like a commodity. So I love entrepreneurs, as you know. They are the absolute rock stars in our world, but sometimes there's a tendency to get distracted and to do the thing that you enjoy, as I said before, not the thing that's good for the business. And I will, there are numerous examples of the founder entrepreneur loves doing a certain thing, therefore that becomes the focus. Or think about the mania for AI over the past few years. Everyone's got an AI, we need to do this in AI, or let's run off and do AI. Take the step back. Does your business need an AI platform? Is that going to absolutely materially move the needle, or are you just doing a me too? I'm just using that as an example. So continue running the business as if you're not going to continue, even if you're going to sell or not, you should run it as if a buyer was going to come in. So that means the management information is there, the right bus, people on the bus, the accountability, the pipelines. Do all of that. Don't get distracted with other shiny things, with other new potential routes to go down. I've spoken to business owners who have a fantastic business, testing and inspection and compliance. This is a superb business model because they might work on a big project, but after that they get the service revenue moving forward. Stay in your lane, right? Be inch wide, mile deep about what you do. Don't go then off and create a marketing agency arm or a brand consultancy. Keep doing what you're doing. Specialist is good. A lot of entrepreneurs think they want to build a group. So we've got this division that does that and this division that does that. I think honestly, the good advice is stick to what you're good at. And I know it sounds really boring to entrepreneurs, but build on that. Don't go and open a TV production arm if you're a construction services business. They just don't fit. And also think about what a buyer would look at. They would go, right, well, I love that part, but why do I want a TV production agency? I mean, I'm using it's a trite example, but you get the idea.
Yeah, I get it. It's like the Amazon effect almost.
Yeah. Don't try.
They started off selling books, and now that you've got Prime, and now you've got AWS and whatever else, why don't we do that?
Yeah.
I could certainly see how that would be a trickle down effect of, oh, I could do that too.
Yeah.
But the reality is that is a massive outlier, and in terms of what people are actually, and it's also IPO'd, it's not being sold.
Yeah.
Which is fundamentally different.
No, agreed. I mean, I think always get some third-party advice. And one of the issues that entrepreneurs and founders often have is that who do they bounce their ideas off? Do they have a coach or a trusted partner, maybe somebody such as yourself? And it's always good to get a second perspective. So strategically, I think another piece of good advice is who outside of your business do you trust? Is there like a Obi-Wan Kenobi figure that you know who can say, well, no, I wouldn't do that if I were you. So I think that is really invaluable to have a peer network, a peer of other business owners that you talk to. Because entrepreneurs by nature are hardwired to do fun and funky new things. But sometimes, I live in a world of accountants. I'm not an accountant myself, but sometimes boring is good, right? So yeah, inch wide, mile deep. Do what you do, just do it brilliantly and better than everyone else. Don't try and overstretch.
I love it. And I think that's probably a perfect point to start rounding off as well. So, Mark, for everyone that's been listening and been hearing about all these different levers that they can pull and how it is that they can materially change their business in order to maximize for saleability as well as Multiplier, tell us briefly about Initium and where people can find you.
Great. So we're an employee-owned business. So we bought out our founders a couple of years ago. What we do is we help people doing exactly what you've just said. So we have kind of three core services. One is the pre-sale consultancy. When we do that buyer hat exercise, we lift the lid and we look at all the things that are good about a business and bad about a business, benchmark it against deals that are happening, but also deals that we've done. I mean, we've been going since the 80s, so we've done close on 1,000 deals now. So
Wow.
you can bet we've done something. No matter what your business is, we'll have done something slightly similar. Our day job is the selling of businesses, and we operate in what they call the mid-market, so the larger SME. So that's a 10 million to about 100 million sale. We're only a small business, so we're very high on the relationship angle. We understand that going through something like this is a huge sea change. So we're there as a support network. There's the agony uncles, and as well as the technical skill set. And the third part is really the best part, which is we help people post-sale. So we have an alumni network that we call the Fellows, and we help business owners who have sold to just unlock new opportunities post-sale. And currently in our number, we have a Guinness World Record holder for riding a penny farthing. We have music promoters. We have a member of the House of Lords. We have somebody who built a coffee farm in Africa. They go on and do incredible things. So my advice to your audience is, I know you love your business, but think what it could mean to you if you sell it. What would you, if you sell a business for 15, 20 million quid, you probably won't need to work. Well, you won't need to work again. What are you going to do with that? There's only so many boats and cars you can buy. Go and give back and go and do something really exciting.
I love it. That's really cool. And where can they find you personally?
Oh, me personally? Well, I'm on LinkedIn, Mark Bentley. I'm connected with you, Oliver, so I'm sure you can find me there. It's initium.com if you want to have a look around our website. And hopefully you'll get the feel. I mean, our world is guilty of being transactional. Corporate finance, the very words strike fear, and due diligence and all these things. We get it because we're entrepreneurial too. So no conversation is ever wasted. If people want to just chat to me personally, I'd be more than happy to have a 20-minute chat about the business.
Amazing stuff. Mark, thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.